Welcome back to the Learning to Program using the Godot game programming engine. This is Michael, and today we're going to be continuing our Mr. Godot project. But what we're going to do is we're going to start transforming this into a platformer game. Now, a platformer game just means that your character can run along and jump and land on platforms. The most notable game of this type is probably something like Mario. So we need a couple things. Right now we can move around our scene, but we need a couple things that we're going to do in this video. And the first is we're going to add gravity, and then we'll notice that if you played with this, you notice if I had added another icon, let's jump in real quick. If I add another icon and then try and run into it, I'm not gonna collide with it. I'm just gonna move right through it. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna add collisions. And so what I'm gonna do is we're gonna jump out of Godot real quick, and I'm going to create a copy of this. So if you're about to make a change and you don't know if it's the right thing to do, what you can do is just come in here and copy your project folder. This works real well when they're still small. And we're going to call this part 2. So you just give it a new name. Now if I ran it here, I would still be loading from my old one. So I need to import, and I go to my project folder, and I need to find my copy that I made and load it up. So this should be exactly like what I just had, but it is a new project and my old project is still there for me to work with. Alright, so what we're going to do here is I'm going to delete both of my images, and I'm going to go into my script, and let's clear this out first. So we don't need up and down anymore because our character is going to fall down, and we don't want him to be able to fly up into the sky. So we'll just save it like that. Now this won't run currently because I'm looking for an icon that doesn't exist, and we'll fix that in a minute. So as we just saw, the two sprites just moved through each other, and a sprite to the Godot engine is just a picture. So it's not actually an object or a physical object. So what we need to do is we need to tell Godot that we have a physical object, and that physical object has a shape, and the shapes are called collision objects, or collision shapes. So in Godot, what we can do is there are 3 types of collision objects. So the first is a static body, and a static body just means that it's not going to move. The term static means not moving. So a static body are good for things like your floor, your walls, things like that. The next is called a kinematic body, and a kinematic body is, as you see here by this little icon, it kind of looks like a player. Kinematic bodies, physics engine won't move it for you, but you as the programmer can move the body around. So a static object, you don't really want to move it because the engine doesn't expect that, but kinematic bodies are expected to move, and Godot provides some helper methods that really help you out with that movement. So they have things like move and collide, and move and slide, or that help you get behaviors that you're expecting. And the final one is called a rigid body. And a rigid body, as you see, has kind of got like a little beach ball icon. Rigid bodies, the physics engine controls. So you as the programmer can apply forces to it, but you don't want to directly move or manipulate that object. So this would be good for things like crate falling down, or a beach ball that you want to bounce around, that sort of thing. So what we're going to do first is we're going to create our, well, let's go back and we'll convert our player into a kinematic body. So we talked about the kinematic body, so I'm going to go ahead and add one. And you'll notice here I have this yellow icon, and if I click it, it tells me the node has no children shapes, so it cannot interact with the space. Consider adding a collision shape 2D or polygon 2D children nodes to define its shape. So here it's giving me a couple hints. It's telling me I need to add one of these two. I need to add a collision shape 2D or a polygon 2D, and they need to be children nodes to define its shape. So right here I can right click and add another child, and I'm going to look for collision shape 2D right there, and there's my other one, the collision polygon. Collision polygon is it allows you to draw it out in the interface, and so if you had a complex shape you could draw it out using the collision polygon. But in this case we're just going to use, most cases you actually want to use the collision shape because these are much more efficient and will run a lot faster. If you had a lot of the collision polygons, your game would probably run very slow. Alright, so now when I add this collision shape I get another warning, and this one says a shape must be provided to the collision shape 2D to function. Please create a shape resource for it. So down here in the inspector you can see I have this shape property and it's currently null, and if I click on it I will get a list of different shapes that I can create. So this is a resource right here, and by clicking here and selecting one of these I would create a resource. Now before I create my resource I kind of need a shape. I need the image that's going to be representative of my player. So I'm still going to use my Mr. Godot icon, but instead of dragging it in, which I could do, but I would have to reorganize my scene over here, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a sprite. Alright. Now this sprite does not have a definition, so you notice I don't have a picture over here, and that what we need to do is define this texture. So I can either drag it over like this and drag it right there on the texture property, and that'll load it up. I can also, if it's oops, I meant to clear, there it is. I can also just click it here and click load and then select my image there. Either way it does the same thing, and I now have a sprite in my scene, and it's underneath my kinematic body and it has a picture. And so now I need to come back to my collision shape and I'm going to add a shape. Now I could add a rectangle because my picture is sort of a rectangle, but what would happen is if I had a flat ground, let's pop this open real quick and we'll draw this so you can see what's going on. So if I had a flat ground like this and I had a box like this, he'd be able to slide along that just fine, right? However, if I had a ground like this, and then I had, say, a little edge in it, even if it's a small edge, this box, who's very square, is going to move along, and he's going to bump into that, and he's going to stop. So a better shape is, so if I had a floor like this, and a better shape, if I had something like a circle, the circle will be able to kind of work its way up over that hump. So what we're going to do is we're going to use a either a circle, or this capsule also works good. So if you have a taller character like a Mario, the capsule would work better. In this case I'm just going to use the circle so we can see how that works. So two things to notice here. First, I can't see my collision shape, and that's because Godot renders from top to bottom through your scene. So what's happening here is I'm rendering my collision shape, and then on top of that I'm rendering my sprite. So it's actually there, it's just hidden by my sprite. So I'm going to move this down. Now it's still under my kinematic body, right? So it's still in this alignment here underneath my kinematic body. If I roll that up, it disappears inside of it. However, it's below my sprite, and now you can see I have this ever so light blue line there, or shape there, and that's my collision shape. So if I had another object, it would ignore it would ignore the picture and collide with this shape here. So what I want to do is I want to resize it. Now you'd be tempted to grab these and resize like that, but what you'll get is some really weird behavior if you try and do that. What you want to do is grab this inside point here, this inside handle that's connected to the collision shape, and it depends on the type of shape. If you have a let me back out, I'm going to do a rectangle shape. You notice on a rectangle I have 2 points. I've got one on top and I've got one on the side. So different shapes have different handles. Some of these have probably even more. But what I'm interested in is on my circle, I just have this one. And so I want to stretch it out to roughly the extent of my my character. Now you'll notice if I had another shape come in, I could theoretically kind of go into this area, but we don't really mind in this instance. Alright, so this is my player, and so let's rename this kinematic body to player kinematic body, just like that. That'll help us be able to identify who that is. Alright, so one more thing about the player before we move on. So if I zoom back out to my scene, and here's my viewport, if I try and click and drag this guy, what just happened is I clicked the topmost node in this stack, and that was the collision shape, and I moved it off instead of moving my whole player, which is what I wanted to do. So to fix that, I can click on my player node there, and I can click this button which says make sure the object's children are not selectable. So if I click that, it kind of gets this lockdown icon, which is also applied over here. Now if I click here and I drag, I get my whole player node dragged along with it. And we'll look into better ways of managing this in the future. But for now, this works real well. Now, one thing I wanted to point out about this is this body has no form to it. It's just the body. But imagine I had a cardboard cutout of myself, and I was holding that out in front of me, and that cardboard cutout is my body. That's the sprite. That's the shape that you see visually. And then the collision shape is a different shape that could be simpler. Say it's this circle, and that's what other people would run into. And so this does not necessarily have to be aligned with my player. So I could have a situation like this. So my player is actually right here. This is where my body is. So say I'm standing here, but maybe I'm holding my cardboard cutout off to the side, right? But then my collision shape is over here on the other side of me, right? So maybe one hand I'm holding my cardboard cutout to one side, and the other side I'm holding my collision shape cutout on the other side. This would be super confusing to in gameplay, because this is where things would collide, and this would be over here, but I'm actually in the middle. To the physics engine, I'm actually here in the middle, and you don't want that. You want all these things to line up properly on top of each other, just like this. So that's just something to note when you're building your player body. Make sure that you are careful about how you do that. Alright, so there's my player, and if I run this, well, I can't run this now because my script, one, depends on this get node icon. So if I change this to if I change this to player kinematic body, this will actually move, but my physics won't behave correctly, and so we're going to look at how to fix that. So there I can still move, and what's happening here is I'm actually moving this player kinematic body, and the sprite and collisions are moving with it. So all I need to do to convert this, now that this is a type of kinematic body, if I look at kinematic body and I look at that class, I look at the things that are available to me, and here I have two methods. I have move and collide and move and slide. And so move and collide will move, if I read the details on this, move and collide will move along, and if it hits another body, it will stop and return information on that collision. That's not quite what I want. I want this move and slide, and it's got a whole long details here, but basically it'll give me the kind of behavior that I want, which is it'll move along, slide along a floor when I'm playing. So all I need to do is change this to move and slide. And I'll copy and paste that there. So now I have left and right, move and slide, and I should be able to move back and forth. But I'm moving really, really slowly, and that's because we moved from pixels to moving by a physics unit. So let me bump that up to 100. So there I move kind of like a little bit slow, but still more of a normal pace. And we need to apply our delta to this, but we'll do that in a later video. So this, you may get different behavior based on how fast your computer is compared to mine. Alright, so next thing we're going to do is we're going to apply gravity. So all we need to do for that is to copy this and paste it. So in these situations, if we didn't have this if statement here, say this if statement was missing, and all we had was this, I would always move to the right. The if statement is branching the code to prevent me from moving to the right or the left. So all I need for gravity is to just not have an if statement. And in this case, every frame, it will try and move the character in that direction. Now I don't want to move in the x direction, because remember the vector is float is in this first position, and x is in this first position, which is left to right, and y is in the second position, which is up and down. And so I want to move in the y direction. So I'm going to move about 20. Let's see how that looks. It's a little slow. So let's go up to about 60. Alright, that'll be suffice for our example. So I'm moving 60 in the y, and if I just let this continue running, he would just fall right off the page. So what we need to do is we need to add something to stop him. And as you remember, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to add another node, and I need it to be at this main level because I don't want it to move with the player. I want it to stay in the scene. So I'm going to add a static body 2D. And I'm going to rename this to floor static body. Floor static body 2D. And I get the same warnings as on my kinematic body. I need to add a collision shape. So I'm going to add a collision shape 2D. And I'm also going to add a sprite. Now I could use my Godot icon, but that might be a little bit confusing. So let's drag and drop in a better image. So I got this from the Kine's free assets, and we're going to use this grass block. So I'm just going to drag him in there. So now I have a grass block, and it looks like that. But I'm going to add it here as my sprite texture. So I'm going to click on my sprite, load, grass, and there it is. And so let's take that one step further and apply the collision shape. And in this one I do want to use a rectangle because I would get some weird behavior. Oh, I've got the order. Now it would work perfectly fine this way, but it's hard to see, so I'm gonna fix my order there and try and match this up as best as I can. Looks pretty good, and that should be it. So now I'm gonna do the same thing I did, is lock that so that my when I drag this around I don't have the problem. I'm going to drag him down there, and let's see if this works. There we go. So my character now moves and slides right along that surface, and if I fall off, my character continues to fall. So let's add a bigger floor. So to add a bigger floor, all we need to do is duplicate this floor body that we made. So it's pretty complicated, right? I've got a sprite, I've got the static body, I've got a sprite and a collision shape, and the collision shape is defined out. If I wanted to do a bunch of those, that would take quite a while. I could stretch it, so I could grab this and I could stretch it, but now my image gets all funny, and I have no flexibility. You know, I can go this way or this way, but I can't really do anything else with it. So all I have to do is hit Control D when I have it selected, and it will duplicate it, right? So now I have two of that same collection of nodes duplicated. So I can just line them up just like that. Let's make one more just like that, and now I should be able to play this and walk between my nodes. So there we go, and you can see that they're not perfectly aligned. You can actually see my character moving up a little bit, and that would have been problematic if my character had been a rectangle shape. But because it's a circle, it's alright, it kind of scoots up it. Alright, so in the next video we're going to look at expanding our floor in a more automated way, and we're also going to look at converting these into their own scene files, so that we don't have our scene hierarchy over here cluttered with so many nodes. Alright, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.